Morning, Soli mahlangu iyo solo waye isocha lomkhondo waye bulawa mafunwe Afrika waye isocha lomkhondo bulawa amandla away two. Thank you very much, comrades. I think we are well settled. Let us officially open our program, comrades. Let us pass greetings. The National Executive Committee of the ANC, led by the President Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, National Youth Task Team members, led by the convener, Comrade Nonqeba Mhlawuli, the PC of the ANC as led by the chairperson of the ANC, the PC of the ANC Youth League as led by the chairperson, Comrade Kwazi, distinguished guests, members and young people across the country of the ANC Youth League who have joined us through various platforms, and all leaders of the MDM structures who've also joined us all throughout our various platforms. Comrades, good afternoon. The National Youth Task Team of the ANC is greeting you. We are hosting a youth empowerment dialogue, and we are hosting this dialogue on a day wherein we commemorate and we celebrate the courageous and the lion-hearted 1976 generation that confronted the apartheid regime, that rejected an education system that was aimed at ensuring that young Black people remain dormant. We are hosting this dialogue on this day, understanding that we need to take cue from that generation by confronting the triple pandemic we face as this generation of young people. We face a pandemic called COVID-19. We face a pandemic that is youth unemployment. We face a pandemic that is called gender-based violence. So we're saying we have created a platform as the National Youth Task Team for ordinary young people to interact and interface with the leadership of the ANC, who are also leadership of government, so that we're able to shape and discuss on how do we overcome this triple pandemic as this generation. We have no choice but to survive, and we must demonstrate the vigor and the spirit that the 1976 generation demonstrated. With those few words, comrades, we are officially opening our program. Our program is going to unfold in this fashion. We are going to have an introduction of guests. I know you've got programs. We're going to have a welcoming address, a very brief welcoming address that will be rendered by the chairperson of the ANC Youth League in the province. We are going to have the introduction of guests that is going to be rendered by Comrade Muntu Ngule. We are going to have an input or a message of support by the chairperson of the ANC in the province, who will also be introducing the president of the ANC, who will then give us an input. After the input, we will then have a panel discussion that will be facilitated by the National Youth Task Team convener, Comrade Nonqeba. We will then have discussions from the floor, And then we'll have closing responses and closing remarks from the president of the ANC. We'll then have a vote of thanks item. Then we would have come to the end of our program. So that is how our program is going to unfold. For now, without a waste of time, I am going to call upon the stage the chairperson of the ANC Youth League in the province, Comrade Kwazim Shengu, to come and to welcome us. A slogan, comrades.
Amanda, away too. So thank you so much, Comrade Joy, coordinator, the NTT. And let's greet the president of the ANC, the chairperson, the provincial chairperson of the ANC, the convener and the entire leadership of the NYTT, the guests or the panelists who are amongst us, and everybody who has joined here today and those who are following us virtually. We were given just a few minutes to welcome all of you in the province of KwaZulu-Natal and in this region, in particular, the region of Moses Mapita. Today, we commemorate 45 years since the heroic struggle by young people in bringing about the freedom we enjoy today. Young people have always been at the cutting edge of the struggle from the very foundation or formation of the oldest liberation movement in the country, the African National Congress. Not just in the country, in the continent, I should say. And when the struggle of the African people was being watered down by the conditions of the time, it was the formation of the ANC Youth League that revived the struggle and brought into the struggle the masses of our people to be their own liberators. The 1976 generation lifted up education as a rallying battle towards the total liberation of African people in particular. It is the generation of the 1980s of young people that responded to the call of President Tambo to render the country ungovernable and the apartheid system unworkable. Today, we're a generation that is called to end the vicious cycle of poverty, marginalization, and exclusion of young people in the mainstream economy and all other facets of life. In this instance, I'm reminded of Comrade Walter Sisulu, who said the following: "It is the youth who have the capacity to renew the struggle, which today continues in new forms. It is the critical gaze of the youth who play the time-honored role of re-examining the status quo, sometimes to the discomfort of the old guard. It is they who have always had the capacity and energy to renew and reinvigorate the ANC so that the grassroots members could continue to play their role or to their rightful part in democratizing our society." This is how Walter Sisulu described the role of young people. It was the role of young people then, and it is the role of young people today under the new conditions. The theme for this year was determined to be the year of my Charlotte Maclege, growing employment towards an inclusive and transformed society. And that remains a political demand What is expected of us now is to then put in place practical and tangible steps towards this inclusive and transformed society, because it will not come about without the struggle of young people in bringing about that society. But as we struggle to bring about that society, it must be indeed an inclusive society in the true sense. When we say young people must be in the mainstream of the economy, it should be young people in a true sense, not only those who are in leadership and those who are close to those who are in leadership. One of the challenges that we face, comrade leadership of the NYTT, is that as we strike towards this transformed society, we need to mend the relations with young people who are not necessarily card-carrying members of the ANC Youth League, or those who don't identify with the ANC, for we represent everyone. We need to mend our relations with them so that collectively we can shoulder the struggle towards the society and the future that we want. And in this instance, and before I sit down, I just want to quote a few paragraphs again from what was written by Busani Tsaweni, which I think really captures the gap between probably those of us in leadership position and the young people. And he had this to say. It's a very short piece, comrades, which I would want to challenge all of us to get and contend with it, painful as it may, but it will help us to chart the way forward for young people. He said, oh, what a precarious moment we are in. Festivals of chairs, extravaganzas of insults, colloquials, summits, conference papers, task teams. We remain poor, dislocated, and disenchanted. In a nervous condition of a future uncertain, we are not at ease. They sip flavored tea, gin and flavored tonic at high tea on high tables. We leak tears drops, dreams shattered, wallowing in single rooms. And I think this is the message that young people are sending to us. Hence my call to say, let us mend the relations with young people. As we discussed today in this youth empowerment dialogue, it should really be an empowerment about young people. It should not turn into yet another colloquial summits and conference papers, but it should translate into tangible steps and actions that will bring about the empowerment of young people as a whole. Thank you so much. You are all welcome.
Thank you very much, Slalo. We're ANC Youth League, La Natal eldership. Thank you very much. We are going to move swiftly, comrades, because we've been allocated specific time with the president. So we're going to be moving to the next item, and we're going to call on stage Comrade Mdokolo Ngudle to introduce the guests that are here.
Mandla, that way too. Long live the ANC Youth League, long live. Long live the ANC Youth League, long live. Economic freedom in our lifetime. Thank you very much, Program Director, the Acting Secretary General of the ANC Youth League, Comrade Joy. Thanks to the Provincial Chairperson of the ANC Youth League from KwaZulu-Natal, Comrade Mshengu. Comrades and all young people in the country, I have been requested to make the introduction of guests in our midst. In fact, I will introduce the leadership of the ANC, which is not guest in this youth empowerment dialogue. Amongst us, comrades, is the president of the ANC, Comrade Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, the chairperson of the ANC in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Comrade Sihle Zikalala, the leadership of the ANC Youth League NYTT as led by Comrade Nongceba, who's the acting president of the ANC Youth League, Comrade Nongceba Mhlauli, and acting secretary general of the ANC Youth League, Comrade Joy Maimela, and the ANC Youth League National Youth Task Team members. In the room is Comrade Tlangi Mohale and Comrade Colin Malachi. Other comrades who are members of the NYTT are joining virtually. Our panelists, comrades, who are our guests in this platform and other platforms, virtual platforms, your Facebook, Zoom, WhatsApp, and other digital platforms that would have allowed young people throughout the country to join this important gathering through. Our panelist today, comrades, is the president of the South African Youth Council, which is an apex umbrella organization of all youth formations in the country. Is Thembinkosi Josopi. Then it's the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Youth Development Agency, Comrade Wasim Karim. Then we have the Commissioner for Gender, who's also an economist, Dr. Thabiseng Moleko. Those comrades are our guests and the leadership that has joined us today. Thank you very much, Comrade Acting Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Comrade Ngudle, who is the member of the National Youth Task Team of the ANC. Comrades, we're going to move swiftly to allow, I hope comrades are very ready. Comrade Fifi, I hope we are ready. We are going to invite the chairperson of the ANC, who is joining us, who is here with us virtually, Comrade Sihle Zikalala, to render a message or an input and also introduce the president of the ANC. Chairperson.
Thank you, Program Director. The ANC President, President Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, the NEC members of the ANC who are with us here today, the convener of the ANC Youth League National Task Team, Comrade Nongceba, the coordinator, Comrade Joy, the ANC Youth League NYTT, the Progressive Youth Alliance, the ANC PEC, and all structures of the ANC, fellow comrades and compatriots, we wish to take this opportunity to thank you as the National Youth Task Team, which is responsible for the day-to-day running of the ANC Youth League, revival of its structures and convening of the conference. We thank you for choosing KwaZulu-Natal to be the host of this very important dialogue. We are also mindful that this takes place during the significant day, as it is marking the Youth Day in our country. But this Youth Day is significant in that it is in the 27th year of our democracy. The presence of our top leadership in the form of the president in this youth dialogue attests to the recognition of the powerful role played by the youth in shaping our movement and advancing the national democratic revolution. This is a historic and yet a defining moment for the movement. This is a historic movement because we can celebrate the consolidation of power since 1994 to today. But it is also a defining moment because as comrades and cadres of the movement, we are called to renew and advance the unity of the movement. We have no illusion that this is a testing time for our movement. It has been said before that the ANC has a remarkable capacity for criticism, self-criticism, and self-correction. And as the ANC leadership, we equally draw from the wisdom of the generations before us in the leadership to light our path forward. In his June 16 message in 1984, former President Comrade Oliver Tambo had this to say, and I quote, "In saluting you this month of June, our call to you is organize, mobilize, and set up mass offensive around the immediate issues of the day and the fundamental question of the people's power." Now, close quote. As former president said this, Comrade Tambo, we must ask ourselves, because the immediate task in 1994 was to mobilize the youth, which Comrade Peter Mkaba, Comrade Rapu, and others responded to. We must ask ourselves, what are the tasks of us as the ANC, but more importantly, of the Youth League? For the Youth League today, that organizing and mobilization should unfold within the context and the ambit of its two mission of its existence. The objectives of the existence of the Youth League is to champion the interest of the youth and organize the youth into the ranks of the movement, the ANC. The ANC Youth League need to organize the youth from across all youth sections into its ranks and its structures. The Youth League should speak for unskilled and unemployed youth. It should speak for unemployed graduates and equally represent the interest of young professionals and those who have exited and fortunately got employed. It should agitate for policies that advance youth interest in education, economy, and all other facets of life. In organizing the youth into the ANC, the Youth League has to ensure that the ANC is renewed and that the ANC is united. So we need a Youth League that is very objective, composed of critical, scientific, but grounded cadres who are enriched in the political theory and the mass work of the movement. While rebuilding itself, the ANC Youth League will need to set up the mass offensive to ensure that the ANC retain its mass support and advance the people's power, more especially in the forthcoming October local government elections. History makes us to believe that the current crop of young cadres in the ANC Youth League, National Task Team, and in other structures of the Youth League will rise to the call of this moment. Like the generation of Lembede, Sisulu, Tambo, and Mandela responded in 1944, like the youth of 1976, like the youth of Comrade Jackie Silebi, Peter Mkaba, Sibongile Mkabela, and others responded to the call by Olivo Tambo to render the country ungovernable and the apartheid system unworkable. So today, the National Task Team of the Youth League need to respond to the immediate challenges of the youth as well as the immediate challenges of our revolution. So comrades, today, Comrade President, we as cadres of this great movement have invested in your confidence to lead us. We are here and knowing that you have been mandated and empowered by the 54th Conference of the ANC and by branches of the ANC to lead this glorious movement. We have full confidence that you will lead this ANC. Our singular and collective message must be that of unity. We welcome you, Comrade President, to the province. We thank you for the opportunity to have this dialogue with young cadres of our movement. We must emerge from this dialogue better organized, better mobilized, and more united to advance the revolution in the execution of the immediate task. Comrade President of the ANC, the platform is yours, and we thank you for availing yourself to engage with young people of our glorious movement. Comrades, I thank you. Comrade President.
Thank you, Comrade Sihle Zigalala, Chairperson of the ANC in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. And thank you, Comrade Program Director, Comrade Joy Maimela. I extend my greetings to the leadership of the ANC Youth League, as expressed through the NYTT, led by convener, Comrade Nongeba Sauli, and yourself, Comrade Joy, as coordinator, and indeed all other comrades that you work with, the working committee, and indeed the broader task team. I also extend my greetings to the leadership of the ANC who are present at this dialogue today, as well as the provincial leadership of the ANC Youth League, who are also present in this dialogue. Comrades, it is a joy and a pleasure to be in your midst and also to be having an opportunity to listen to your panelists, as well as to the participants who will be putting forward their thoughts and their views. I'm sorry that due to COVID, we are not able to be there physically with you, but thanks to the wonders of modern technology that we are able to have this dialogue across a number of platforms that enables us to be present at the same time together, as though we are in the same venue. It is not my intention to speak much and long, because I really want to listen to young people. Today is your day. Today we recall the youth of 1976. We recall their sacrifices, their activism, their militancy, their vision, their aspirations, and their total determination and their bravery to bring about freedom as they struggled against an oppressive system of apartheid, which manifested itself through a compulsory imposition of the Afrikaans language on them, which sparked the uprising that engulfed the whole country and also gave birth to the freedom or the intensification of the struggle, but finally to the freedom that we enjoy today. It is indeed thanks to the youth, not only of 76, but the youth, the 40s, when the outstanding leaders of our movement decided that they needed to inject militancy in their movement, this glorious movement, and turn the trajectory of the African National Congress around. And indeed, that contribution spurred the movement on and made the movement militant. And today, we live in the legacy that they have left behind. And all this having started, of course, in 1912, when young people, as in Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, as in Sol Plaatje and many others, decided that this movement should be formed. So we see young people having played a key role throughout the ages to lead a struggle against what was oppressive, exploitative, and totally unacceptable. And that, comrade, is a legacy that we have, a legacy of a visionary, forward-looking young generation that has always come to the fore at the right time. And this is what we have as a bequest. We've been bequeathed this DNA of young people who have been able at very important moments of the history of our movement and indeed of the country to lead from the front. Today, our country is engulfed, or it's in the midst of enormous challenges. COVID-19 is a major one. We can put that on the side and say we all have to come up with clear strategies of how to defeat COVID-19. But the triple challenge that we've always had of poverty, unemployment, and inequality is what we live with and what we've got to continue struggling against. And today, the added challenge, which is a subset of the unemployment challenge, is youth unemployment. It is the young people who bear the greatest brand.
Apologies, comrades. It is technology. We are just trying to find out what happened. Seemingly, we've lost the president. And I think, Comrade Fifi, are you working on reconnecting? So let us just, I think we'll to be patient for a few minutes so that the president can reconnect and we can listen to the president.
And processes that we need to embark upon, and clear plans that we need to implement so that we're able to go. So this is a great and golden opportunity we have. As this is an ANC Youth League occasion, let's address the tasks that we have in our own organization. Firstly, the ANC Youth League, broadly, the ANC itself. And because the ANC is the leader of society, we must then transpose what we can come up with onto a bigger canvas, which is the country, and say, what are our tasks? How are we going to address these tasks? Unemployment is the key one. As I end my initial remarks, which are really questions that I am throwing at the panelists and yourselves as dialogue participants, I would like to say that this is a very important dialogue. It is a platform conceived by the NYTT, comrades Nongeba, Comrade Joy, and the others that you lead with. I'd like to applaud you for having come up with this initiative on a day like this, June 16, when we commemorate 45 years of the 1976 uprising. You are, through this and the other work that you've been doing, truly injecting life, activism into the ANC Youth League process and organization. I applaud you because I have a sense as president of the ANC that the Youth League is now rising again, and the Youth League is now going to start playing a role which spans the entire country in providing leadership to the young people of our country, coming up with solutions and practical solutions for that matter, in providing inspiration to the young people of our country and getting on with the process of showing the direction of where we would like the youth to go to, but more importantly, of leading the process of how we address the challenges that young people are facing in our country. You are a revolutionary component of the Congress movement. You've always been militant, you've always been progressive, but you've always also been practical, leading by example. And this is borne out by the leadership that this organization has always had since its formation in the 40s. So you have inherited a great organization, and all we can do is to wish you the best, but also support you fully and completely, because you are indeed the future leaders of this country come from the Youth League, and you've got to provide that leadership. And we would like to see that now clearly demonstrated, and all of us must say, yes, they deserve to lead this movement, they deserve to lead this country. But today, let us come up with practical strategies and solutions of how we are going to lead the youth out of the challenges that currently beset, and how we are going to forge ahead to unite the African National Congress to reactivate the ANC Youth League. Those are the tasks, those are the issues that I expect that we will focus on. And so therefore, I look forward to this dialogue. I promise you with a great deal of anticipation and expectation. And yes, you'll call upon me to respond later. I'd like to respond to really outstanding suggestions, proposals, thoughts, analysis that will have been provided. And today, it's not a day where we bemoan, we complain. This is a day when I want to hear solutions, proposals, forward-looking thoughts that will take the youth of South Africa forward. So you carry on your shoulders a huge task. The unemployed youth of our country, the discouraged youth of our country, look to you today to come up with very practical strategies of how we address the challenges. So thank you, comrades, for giving me this opportunity, and I look forward to listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mungameli, the president of the ANC. And I think from our side, as the National Youth Task Team, it is important that we also thank you and express our gratitude in the fact that when we requested you to form part of this dialogue, I think to say it was short notice will be an understatement. However, understanding the centrality of the role that young people have to play in shaping and building this country and addressing and resolving the problems that are facing them, you availed yourself and you accorded us an opportunity to interact with you. So we're going to do just that. This program, we wanted to ensure that the voices that you hear are voices of young people, because we ourselves and Comrade Nongeba, we have ample opportunity to engage you and to engage the leadership of the ANC collectively on various issues of young people. But we wanted to create this platform for you to hear the voices of young people on how they think we should be building and how they think we should enhance our policies to ensure that they swiftly resolve or intervene in their challenges. So we're going to welcome on stage the convener of the National Youth Task Team, Comrade Nongeba Mhlauli. But before she walks to the stage, let me just take this opportunity to acknowledge that amongst us, we are joined by other National Youth Task Team members. There's Comrade Garabo, Mohale, who's joined us. There's Comrade Fasia. There is Comrade Insaf Isaac, and of course, Comrade Colin, who was introduced before. So we're going to allow the national convener, Comrade Nongeba Mhlauli, to come and facilitate a panel discussion. And we'll then take it from there. Comrade convener. Comrades, we are welcome to sing. The fact that it's a dialogue does not mean that we should not sing as young people. Comrade Kulubuse, can you assist us with the revolutionary song? Siya, 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 no ma. Kubi, 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 oh, siya, 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 siya,
Angizohlala phansi singaculi. Kubi, 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 oh. Siyaya, oh siyaya. Hayi baba ngathi gilekile igoli. Kubi, 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 oh. Siyaya, oh siyaya. Dobola, Bessi Shaya, how Bessi Bopa, Gooby, 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 oh, Siaya, oh, Siaya, away, mama.
Amandla, Amandla, Amandla. Long live the African National Congress Youth League, long live. Long live the ANC Youth League, long live. Good afternoon, comrades. Thank you very much to the comrade who responded to our request. Comrades, the fact that it's a dialogue does not mean that it must not take the shape and form and character of what the Congress Youth League is about. The reason that today we are celebrating Youth Day is precisely because of the militant, brave, and radical young people who said that we do not agree with our status quo, we do not agree with our state of being, and we will challenge a system that oppresses us. So when we gather, comrades, in the name and actions of those brave young people, we need to take the shape and form and character of those young people. So with those words, comrades, let me start by greeting the leadership of the ANC Youth League task team who are here today. They've been acknowledged. We greet the leadership of the Youth League in the province, the leadership of the ANC in the province as led by the chairperson, the panelists that we have here today, as they've been introduced, as well as the president of the African National Congress, who has just given us an input and who really said that today he's here to listen. And comrades, the reason why, when we thought as a task team, who really has been tasked to rebuild the ANC Youth League, we said, if, as outlined by the chairperson of the ANC in the province when he spoke earlier on, that the twin tasks of the Youth League is to champion the interest of young people and to rally them behind the banner of the ANC. We then said, in championing the interest of young people, let us understand from young people themselves, outside of myself and Comrade Joy and the comrades that we work with in the task team, what are the daily lived experiences of young people? And if we are to craft a program of action as an organization, we need to do that having engaged our core constituency. So what we are really here today, comrades, because we said we can have a rally and speak to ourselves and sing songs and pat ourselves in the back and said, wow, comrades, we've really done a great job. But would we have come up with solutions that address the triple pandemic that young people are faced with? We would not have. If we are saying that COVID-19 is a pandemic, the first pandemic that we faced with, and that gender-based violence is the second one, then youth unemployment must definitely be the third one. And because we are young people, we are faced with all of those three pandemics. When the president spoke earlier on today at the official June 16 celebration, he said that we are a generation that has been born into democracy, and that is correct. In fact, we are the products of a successful democratic project. However, 27 years later, do our lived experiences represent that we are a product of a successful democratic project? Or do our lived experiences actually point to a democratic project that is on a brink of failure? Because when over 70% of young people are unemployed, your democratic project is in danger. It is in danger because you have a constituency of young people who are destitute. It is in danger because you have a constituency of young people who really can go onto the streets, as we have a couple of weeks ago, and said, our hunger and poverty can no longer go on unabated. So today, what we want to do here today, comrades, and we've really brought together young people from different sectors. We have Comrade Ntabi Singh, who is going to be our first panelist, who really is going to speak about the exclusion of young people in the economy of South Africa. Because that is our main problem, comrades, is the fact that young people are excluded from their economy. The biggest population group in this country is excluded from the economy of the country that they live in. And that is a challenge that we today, by the end of today, we must have at least 10 practical things that we say we want the Youth League to go and champion, advocate for, and implement. 10, comrades. If we don't, as this group of 50 people in this room, and I think another 100 odd on the hybrid platform, if we cannot come up with at least 10 practical things that we want, leaving this room today, to mandate the Youth League to go and say, this is what we mandate you to go and implement and advocate for and champion in our interests, we really would have wasted a lot of time here today. So Comrade Ntabi Singh, she's going to speak about the exclusion of young people in our economy. She's also a gender activist. We've noted that GBV is the second pandemic that we faced with, and she'll touch on that as well. And then after that, we'll go to our next panelist. Amandla.
I'm going to get straight to it. A very good afternoon to the ANC President, President Cyril Ramaphosa, the chairperson of ANC in the province we're in, Comrade Zigalala, the NTT convener, Comrade Nongceba, thank you so much for inviting me with these very brilliant panelists. Also to the leadership of the ANC in the province who have joined us, the Youth League members, the NTT members, NYTT members who are here, a very good afternoon. But more importantly, I want to greet the youth of 2021. Have you ever heard anyone say the youth of 2021? Amandla to the youth of 2021. My question to you is this: what are you willing to sacrifice to see a prosperous and rebuilt South Africa? What are you willing to sacrifice? We always look to the youth of 76. They paid a price, they sacrificed, some of them with their lives. But the question that I want to ask us as the youth of 2021, what are we willing to do to rebuild this country? And I believe there are things I'm going to touch on that are very practical, that I believe that we need as the youth to look forward. But I think for us to look ahead, we can remember what happened in the past, but we've got to build forward. We've got to plan forward. We've seen many of the emerging markets plan for 50, even up to 100 years. But I believe that we've got to look forward as the youth of 2021. If we are going to change and rebuild the South Africa we are in, we have to build forward. I do understand that the nation that we are all in has gone through a season of intense testing and tribulation. And in many ways, I think we are where the youth of 1976 were in 76 now. Many of us have seen heart-wrenching pain at the loss of loved ones due to the pandemic, but also many of us have lost hope. I may be speaking to people here who have lost hope. I may be being listened to many of our youth who have lost hope, because many of us have seen structural unemployment where young people are not working for more than 5 years, even with a qualification. Young people are unable to access finance, capital, to start a business, even with an idea. Young people are sitting with ideas, are sitting with hopes, are sitting with dreams, but they're unable to impact and even implement those dreams because of the structural flaws that inhibit you accessing and entering into the economy. This is the issues that we are dealing with today. Many of us are awake and we have watched the nation bleed at the destruction of many of our institutions. Our economy has been downgraded. We've simply seen a vicious attack from the soul of South Africa in many angles. The systemic and structural flaws are inherent, and market failure, quite clearly, with 11.4 million unemployed South Africans, is unable to respond decisively to the problems of our time, particularly to the problem of unemployment. So the question I have is, what will your response be? What will your response be, Nongceba, as the leadership of the ANC Youth League today? what will your response be to the task team members that have been tasked to rebuild and to put hope again? Who must take up the bricks and rebuild the broken walls of South Africa? I believe it is us. It is you, it is I, it is the youth and all structures that must set their minds to work and to rebuild. It is us who have the energy and the passion, and it is us who will be left here in 50 years to work this South Africa and live in this South Africa, because there is nowhere else we want to go. It is us. You and I must rebuild. We cannot leave the rebuilding of our economy, our society, and institutions to anyone else. So the first thing I want to leave with us today is that it is you and I that must rebuild. It is you and I that must sit in our minds and in our hearts to rebuild. It is not the same youth as 76. We cannot celebrate because there's very little to celebrate. I must be honest. It may take us a decade, it may take us 25 years, it may take us a lifetime, but to us, we must make a decision to rebuild. There's a saying that if a man is not willing to lose his life, then he or she will lose it. And the question is, are you willing to rebuild and lose your life to rebuild this country? I want to put my hand up and say, I am willing. I don't know if you're willing, but I am willing today. Are you willing? Are you willing? 1.4 million people have lost their jobs, are unemployed. More than 1.4 people are less employed now than they were last year. Already we had 11.4 million unemployed South Africans acutely suffering from the underperformance of the economy. We must accept that the economy has underperformed. The economy has not dealt decisively with the problem of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. We must dissect who is most affected by the disproportionate market failures of the economy. And I want to say today, young women, rural women, our Black African youth across gender have been disproportionately affected by the outcomes and the economic exclusion of the economic outcomes. Inequality and poverty are concentrated amongst these groupings that I talked to. Therefore, all our interventions must be targeted and be directed at these groupings. It isn't enough for us to hope that the market will somehow deal decisively with structural unemployment. It hasn't done so over the past 25 years. It hasn't done so even after the COVID pandemic effects through the relief schemes, and it will not do so unless we see targeted interventions that will actually decisively deal with these inequalities. Poverty has been exacerbated. In fact, due to COVID, those who fell out of poverty have now fallen back in because of the COVID effect. Everything that we have done to reverse poverty, inequality, and unemployment because of the effect of COVID, even though we were badly off, has been worsened due to that. So we have to now take 10 steps forward because of the steps we have been forced to take backwards. A nation must be judged by how it treats the most vulnerable in the society. There is a massive problem with violence against women and children. It's reached frighteningly high proportions. We know spousal abuse by intimate partners, incest, molestation of children, intimate partner killings, sexual violence statistics. I'm not going to share those today. We know what they are. They're frighteningly high. The majority of South African women have been violated in one way or the other, even children. This is shocking, but these are the realities of our lifetime. These are the battles of our time. So I'm going to put to you, comrades, that the battle of our time is economic. The battle of our time is the gender-based violence or the violence against women and children. The battle of our time is poverty and unemployment. These are the vices that we must fight. We must rebuild our societies, our families. We must rebuild and fight against violence against women and children, the LGBTQI+, which is astounding and rising. We have to reject gender-based violence. We have to reject unemployment like the youth of 76 rejected it. We have to reject inequality like the youth of 76 rejected oppression. We have to reject unemployment like the youth of 76 rejected language of instruction of Afrikaans that was enforced upon them. We cannot accept unemployment as a status quo. We cannot allow ourselves to be accepting of 3.1 million discouraged work seekers. That means that our youth have simply stopped looking for work because they cannot find it and they have lost hope. These are the things we need to reject. The question then I have is this: what are we going to do to rebuild these desolations? And if we are to rebuild, we need a vision. We know that approximately a third of South Africans are living in rural areas, areas that are not in the urban centers, areas where we know the level of income and services vary, particularly from the urban populace. Areas like the Eastern Cape and Limpopo, areas in KZN even, where more than 2/3 of our people are living in rural poverty. Does our vision include our people who are not in the cities? Does our vision include those who have been economically excluded, segregated, even prior to 1994 from an economic infrastructure perspective? It must. It must. Does our vision include those who are far from the urban areas, to the extent that the struggle there continues far more than the struggle in the urban areas? For that, we need to see tangible steps that are taken to address these things. I believe that number one, our vision needs to see every woman and child fulfill their potential without fear of loss of life, sexual assault, domestic violence in their journey of life. One. Two, we must target a society that sees into reality the economic empowerment of the youth, the economic empowerment of our rural and township youth, the economic empowerment of women who are in the main excluded from mainstream economy. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? We've got to target one, increased investment into social and economic infrastructure. By what quantum? We've got to measure it. One of the serious problems we have as we see the outcomes and the failed economic performance or the underperformance is that there's very limited economic outcomes in terms of measuring our investment into social and economic infrastructure. We've got to look at a 10% increase as a target in investment into economic and social infrastructure. These are the tools we need to instigate and stimulate demand in these areas that are rural, but also in our urban areas where economic activity has reached literally a deadlock and a stop. Number two, we've got to expand agricultural and industrial production. The reason why many of our youth enter the labor market, they cannot be absorbed into the economy, is we have what we call a low employment coefficient. That means that the skills that is wanted in the private sector and in the market doesn't speak to the skills that many of us offer. We have a low skill base in South Africa. So because of that mismatch, people cannot find work. And the work that our people will find is in the industry, is in manufacturing, is if we build more factories and we make more of these products that we are drinking, we're eating, we're wearing, the things that you and I use on a day-to-day basis. For us to do that, it means that there have to be targeted support and intervention into manufacturing. I propose that we look at an additional 10 to 100 billion per year going into manufacturing. You've got to, as the ANC Youth League and the National Youth League Task Team, look at how much investment is going to manufacturing. That is where you will get investment for your products. That is where you'll get employment for subsectors. And that is where our young people will be absorbed into the economy, because that sector is what we call labor absorptive. We are building a services sector that leads growth. It is not labor absorptive. China, Korea, Singapore, the East Asian economies were able to absorb many of their unemployed because they decided we have to decisively decide to build manufacturing, agricultural production. We've got to not allow areas that have land to be fallow. We've got to rebuild our economy, our industry, our agricultural production, making sure that those farms that are in the hands of youth are actually productive and are able to sell their products to markets and have access to those markets. These are the fights that you and I should be fighting every day, because they determine whether or not we'll participate or will remain in the 3.1 million discouraged work seekers. I'm about to close, Comrade Chair. The targeted outcome of unemployment. There are three things that you can look at here. You can look at an issue, and I know sometimes it's a controversial one, conscription, or we can call it youth service. There should be no youth unemployed. We should decisively say our youth in all of our communities and our cities and rural areas should work for at least 2 to 3 days a week, doing something that is needed in the community. We have got to make sure that our youth are able to have dignity and contribute to their society. The problem we have now, where the majority of our youth at the peak of their lives are not contributing, is it loses and kills the hope of the entire youth. A generation of 11.4 million who wake up, they don't know what they're going to do. They are looking for work. They want to contribute, but they cannot. And that means that there's a structural failure in the economy. We cannot rely only on the private sector. There've got to be, because of the failures of the market, interventions that target these unemployed youth, those who have not been working for 5 years, 10 years. We cannot say because of that, and the market won't look at you because your CV doesn't have experience. Who must therefore help those youth? We must help those youth. We have a responsibility to help those youth. And I think that these programs where we look at the unskilled and we target at least 30 to 40% of the unskilled to be in these programs, and make sure that these programs are massified. We've got to talk about massification. We cannot be talking about 1,000 when we have 1 million youth, when we have more than 1 million youth that enter the labor market annually. We cannot have a 1 million target of employment when we have 11.4 unemployed South Africans. We cannot be talking about absorbing 1 million in 10 years when 3.1 million currently are discouraged. Every year that number is added. So we've got to talk millions. When the youth is discussing targets for unemployment, nothing less than 5-10 million impact in the long run should be what you are targeting. You've got to massify every program in the provinces. At least each province, if you disaggregate, every programmatic outcome should be looking at least 1 million in each of the provinces absorption in the long run, nothing less. Those that have more densely populated areas, higher per capita GDPs, you can look at more higher level of absorption. But you can look at provinces should not be looking at less than 1 million to target the youth of absorption into these programs. I'm about to close. We hear a lot about international trade, African trade, all these things. If you are going to successfully have a product that enters into any African product, you need a place to manufacture. You need a money, capital, finance to build those things, right? So these agencies of the state, these development finance institutions need to target a proportion of their allocation to the youth. Not only the youth, but investment into productive sectors, manufacturing, industrial capability, and agriculture, so that you can build products that you and I consume. Because of your household income, the majority of us use 70% for food, those things that you're eating. But how many of us Black youth, particularly, are in those value chains? I'm saying that we need to do a whole lot more, but I think that we need, when we decisively come with programmatic interventions, if we are going to increase the participation of South Africans that are primarily excluded, we have got to have an alternative. We cannot continue along the same path as we've always had. In order to change where you're going, you've got to change what you are doing. To do the same thing over and over again, we know it's insanity. So I'm proposing that we stop the insanity and we do something new. Amandla.
Amandla. Comrades, very clear, very practical. In fact, I think that list of 10 we must increase to a list of 50, because already we have 5 very practical proposals that have been made by Comrade Ntabiseng, a very, very thoughtful, very practical presentation that has been made. And this is really what we wanted, comrades, for young people to come here and say, this is the problem, this is how we solve it. We already have 5. Comrade Wasim, the 4th proposal that was made was the issue of youth service. Please come and speak to that. And comrades, I'm sorry, because we are so pressed with time with the president, we are really going to be very strict. We know that we are doing a disservice to your inputs. If we can really, really compress it to 5 minutes. Comrade Wasim is the CEO of the NYDA. Comrade Ntabiseng spoke about the importance of a national youth service as one of the programs of the NYDA, and Comrade Wasim is going to speak to that. Thank you very much. Amanda.
Okay, good afternoon, comrades. Let me greet the President of the ANC, Comrade President Ramaphosa. Let me greet the Chairperson of the province, Comrade Sihle Sikalala, and all of the comrades and the leadership of the NYTT. I wish you a happy and a blessed Youth Day and Youth Month 2021. So let me first and foremost say that I think these programs are critical in the development of policy in South Africa. Yeah? I feel that young people need to have input into policy development. I think in the past week, we've seen developments in the country around energy policy. We saw South African Airways and the development around state-owned enterprises policy. And today, the president made significant announcements around youth policy. Yeah? Now, within youth policy, one of the elements is an expanded national youth service program. So maybe let's talk to what the elements of a youth service program are and where they relate to in relation to ANC policy and South African government policy. Youth service was introduced around 2004 during Comrade President Mbeki's time, as its primary objective was not necessarily economic. Economic was more a secondary concession of youth service, but its primary purpose was the nation building and social cohesion in a South African society. Now, many countries around the world have used youth service programs. You go to the United States, young people can take a year after they finish their school. They have programs called Teach for America, the American Peace Corps. You go to Germany, there they've used youth service as a building bridge tool. After the correlation of Germany into one entity, East Germany and West Germany, we know the history of World War II. Germany used youth service as primarily a nation building tool. So some countries use it as a transitional tool for young people. They use it as nation building. In South Africa, it had a very strong element of social cohesion and nation building attached to it. Between 2004 and today, we've made many developments around national youth service, right? The biggest program that has a national youth service component attached to it is expanded public works in South Africa. I think 20 to 30% of the EPWP budget is dedicated to youth service. The community works program is another massive program. If you drive around rural towns in South Africa, you'll see many people in their CWP uniforms, particularly women and young women tend to benefit from CWP, and CWP has a youth service element attached to it. NARISEC in the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development and Land Reform has been massive element of youth service in South Africa. When we do the review of youth service, what do we see happening? We see that often youth service programs have become heavily skills focused in South Africa. Now that is not necessarily a bad thing, but what we find is that often the programs have lost their core element of having service to their community. That means when we wanted to put a young person into a service opportunity, we would have wanted to inculcate in them the nature of community service, that even when they exit that program, they retain the culture of service within them as a person, and they stay within that service for the rest of their life, even if they move on to other economic opportunities. What we find is that while these programs have helped to alleviate poverty, often they've become too much about the value of the stipend that is received on a monthly basis by the young person. And lastly, with all public employment, whether it's EPWP, CWP, The critical issue is we cannot seem to transition young people, and people for that matter, from opportunities which are short-term into more permanent. And that talks to what comrades are saying, is that we have deep structural issues in our economy. So when President had asked the NYDA and other entities of government to go out and design a revitalized service program, first and foremost at the core of service must be that it is service, that this is one's duty to your country, to your community, and what you're doing is beyond just the economic benefit that comes out of the program. Two, you have to strengthen the skills aspect that is being transferred within the program. Now, I'm sorry to say this, but what I find is that in many of these programs, the non-governmental, the NGO sector has hijacked many government programs and used it for personal enrichment. I do not truly believe there's anything like an NGO here. Most entities are there to establish some sort of vested interest from many of these programs. So what you do have is you have this element, particularly go and look at the community works program. You have service providers who have a requirement to train for skills development, but they teach young people skills which are no longer relevant in the economy. So when we said we are designing a revitalized youth service program, we said that whatever skills are transferred, that has to be within the skill set that will translate into more formal kinds of employment. The third thing we said is that there has to be more meaningful transitions. A youth service program can exist for a period of 12 months, and a young person must know when they are entering a youth service program, a door is being opened in their life. But the expectation has to be, and government must support the transition of that young person. You cannot continue to have bouncing in and out of short-term opportunities, because what that does is it raises hope amongst young people and systematically kills it later. So we've gone about designing a revitalized national youth service program. Thankfully, National Treasury has agreed to fund the program under the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. Now, I know the NYTT in the first statement asked that we must do 3 million youth service opportunities in the country. It's slightly less than that, but it's still a fairly big number. 30,000 youth service opportunities really speaks to a bigger and a revitalized youth service program in South Africa. Just to give you one example of how service can make a difference, right? I mean, yesterday I visited a school here in Pietermaritzburg, and you find that, yes, we've increased access to education fundamentally in South Africa. We've created much better conducive learning environments, but lots of young people don't have the benefit of their private sector counterparts in terms of extracurricular activities. So just take a service program. If there's one thing that unites us, builds our nation, brings us together, it's sports, arts, and culture. So you take this opportunity of young people themselves. Maybe they're unemployed, but they have talents. Every young person has skill and talent. Maybe some of them were talented at art, some of them were talented at sports. You take those young people and you place them in the basic education system, and you have solving youth service kind of programs, running after school programs for other young people, taking them away from activities that take them away from these negative things that we see in our communities. Sports, arts, and culture is just one opportunity to build service around, develop skills, pay young people stipends, and translate the economic opportunities. I'll close with this here. If we want to develop a practical solution for youth unemployment, service is only the first step to be able to do it. In a country with high levels of unemployment like we have in South Africa, I think the time has come to introduce something that looks like an employment guarantee for young people. That is, in South Africa, if you want to work as a young person, you are guaranteed work by the state. That is how we channel the energies, the passions of our young people, only when the state has that ability to act as an employer of last resort. And we can only achieve that, comrades, if we are willing to break the austerity budget that we have implemented. I still do not understand why the wages and stipends that you pay to young people have to be considered austerity in nature, because that money is paid to young people. They spend that money in local communities, VAT is paid on that amount, and that money recirculates in the economy. The key to changing the economic growth of this country is investing in an employment guarantee for all young people, guaranteeing within the constitution a right to work for young South Africans. Thank you very much, comrade.
Thank you very much, Comrade Wasim. We are now, comrades, on number 6 on our list of the practical proposals that we have to leave with here today, and that is investment in an employment guarantee scheme. Earlier on, comrades, I did not know that our 4th panelist had joined us. He is here. He was hiding there, over there. That is Comrade Ayabonga Cawe. He is going to, Comrade Ayabonga is also, he's a development economist. Some of you who listen to Metro FM might hear his show on a weekday. I think it's in the evening. He's also a broadcaster. He does current affairs, a political analyst, an author. He just has a new book out, and also an activist in his own right. Comrade Ayabonga, we are now on practical solution 6. We hope that you're going to give us another 4. If you can please come forward. Amandla.
Amandla, Matla, Kina Congress Youth Kina, Congress Youth Kina, Msebenzi Kina. Thanks, comrades. Unyansilu nongaba bendisifihle pha ekoneni, but I must take this opportunity to thank the National Youth Task Team for the invite, but to also take this opportunity. And I think the comrades who spoke before me have covered a lot. And I want to maybe pick up on the comment that Wasim was making. That this challenge of austerity, Comrade President, is a big issue. And so as I greet colleagues this afternoon, I think that's a good place for us to start. We saw, comrades, in the budget, the great difficulty in the budget cuts that we saw in the areas of education, in the areas in particular of TVET education. We saw budget cuts in terms of social grants. We saw budget cuts that went to the welfare programs. And in a sense, as young people, I think we need to ask this question, which is, under the conditions that we face, with the highest inequality, the highest unemployment, and a once-in-a-century crisis in our society, is this the time to be undertaking considerable amount of fiscal consolidation? Is this the time to have as an apex goal to run a primary budget surplus? And I would say, Comrade President, that the views of many young people is that that is not the case. Many young people are saying that we ideally would like a counter-cyclical fiscal policy regime that targets 2 areas. One is the crisis of social reproduction that we see in our society, investment in social infrastructure, investment in social welfare, but also investment in the things that can ensure that there is considerable improvement in our households from one generation to the next. This is education, this is skills development, and all of the things that are critical to what we call intergenerational social mobility. So in a sense, I wanted to foreground my remarks as I start my discussion with that. I also want to say, maybe picking up on what Ntabiseng was raising, that we do need a very strong industrialization program in our society. I would agree with that. But I think where we might be faced with a challenge or a constraint is insofar as we think about how we finance that. In an environment where we know that financial capital and South Africa's sophisticated capital markets channel investment away from productive investment into the things that employ people. And I think as young people, we must accept that this stage of capitalism that we're in now is able to generate profit without necessarily needing to employ people. I asked a comrade earlier on, when was the last time she went to the bank? And I want to ask the same question to many comrades who are here. When was the last time you went into a brick and mortar branch in a bank? And there's a reason for that. The financial services sector has been able to create an accumulation model that no longer requires bricks and mortar, that no longer requires the type of bank tellers that you would normally interact with inside the bank. Now, that is a lesson. Insofar as it says to us that at a macroeconomic and even at a microeconomic level, we need to be able to answer, how do we create employment? How do we create livelihood opportunities in a context where capital no longer needs warm bodies in order to generate profit? And I think that's a central question in 21st century South Africa, where you've got a considerable amount of young people outside of the labor market. So, Comrade Nonaba, with the few minutes that I have, I want to maybe touch on 2 or 3 things practically that we can do. I think the one, and this is a lesson we learned from the Soweto generation. The Soweto generation learned very early that as young people, yes, we might be young in the society, but we are not this niche corner in a society. We are a part of society, and in so far as we want to achieve our objectives, we are going to need to create political and economic and social links with our parents and the society around us. And so the starting point is this question, which is, how do we make sure when we talk about employment, it's not just about getting more and more young people into work, but also interrogating the quality of that work. And I think the practical tasks are as follows. I think the first task is that we need to consider, as young people, assisting in the mass registration of domestic workers on UIF and COIDA, and to extend UIF and COIDA to workers that are not included in that system. We've seen now a court judgment at the end of last year that includes domestic workers who are injured or die in the workplace in the benefit framework of COIDA. Now, we must welcome that. And that's necessary, but it's not a sufficient condition to ensure that people access that benefit. And if you go to COIDA, they will tell you there are probably 1 or 2 people who have been able to access that benefit. And so we need to be able to respond to that. I think the second thing is the implementation, and I think Wazim touched on this somewhat, the implementation of a work guarantee scheme. And I want to argue for a work guarantee scheme for those with a matric and above, and even those who have some form of what in the old days would be called maybe JC, which is like grade 10, standard 8. And to do so in a way that allows policy to recognize that even looking for a job is a job. It's not easy to look for a job, but we need to be able, if we want to overcome the challenges of the job search. Many young South Africans are discouraged, not willing to go out and undertake the job search, largely because of spatial apartheid. There are vast distances between where we live and where the opportunities are. We might not have bus fare to be able to go and undertake the job search every day. But the democratic government has a BRT system in many of our cities. How do we make sure that that BRT system is part of a voucher system that allows young people to go out and search for work? But of course, that is not to assume that the work is there. And so you need to be able to undertake the industrialization that Comrade Ntabiseng was talking about. But also what we need at the level of our society is to also be able to understand where the opportunities are. And we need, in a way, what the Indian system does, which is what is called the compulsory notification of vacancies below a certain level. So if there's a vacancy below, say, 6,500 Rand, and you need to make sure that it's compulsory to list those vacancies in the public employment system inside of the Department of Labor, so that you don't have a situation where these vacancies are the sole preserve of a few and that information is shared among a few. But it also helps our government to be a learning government, because we want a developmental state that is able, in the truest sense, to be a learning government that is able to capture data and understand what is it that works, what is it that does not work. The other element, comrades, that I think we need to do, and I'm concluding here, colleagues, is we need to strengthen the public interest obligations when it comes to mergers, acquisitions, and I think we saw this with the Burger King story. And also deal with excessive executive pay, deal with the pay inequality within both the private sector and in the public service, especially as they relate to the opportunity cost of resources that could be used for further employment, further reinvestment, and the further reskilling of young people. We also need to strengthen, for many young workers who are working in vulnerable sectors of the economy, the enforcement of the national minimum wage. And maybe lastly, colleagues, as I conclude, and I guess this touches on this issue of public employment programs, we also need to make sure that as young people, we are at the front line of understanding and enforcing the 55% youth participation target in the expanded and community works programs. It is saddening, Comrade President, to understand that it is only the Western Cape, the Northern Cape, and Gauteng in the first few parts of this year that have met their 55% youth participation target. And I think we need to be able to shine a spotlight on this program, especially the community works program, at a time where we are going to be spending a considerable amount of money in the next few years or so in the informal settlement upgrade program. And of course, also in our infrastructure-led recovery. Having said that, colleagues, the last comment I think relates to the 18.1 million grants we pay every month. We are talking about making sure that our spaces as young people are not only spaces in the old apartheid dormitory style, where we go back to sleep and we wake up in the morning and go and work in the center of the city. And how we do that is to make sure that even before you plant the first seed in the ground as a land reform beneficiary, that you have a market. And we would like as young people that that market must also include many of our brothers, sisters, mothers, aunts who are beneficiaries of the social grant program. And what does this mean? It means the next time we have a review, President, of the social grant system and the progressive increase of those grants, that we are able to include, even if it's a cashless or voucher component, that is able to make sure that those who are producing, be it that backyard garden, to the prison gardens, right through to the gardens in our communities, are able to access the market that every month is falling and is standing by in our post offices and many places. Having said those, comrades, I want to maybe leave us with these remarks in these trying times in our organization. Comrade Oliver Tambo in 1991, at the first conference of the ANC after its unbanning, had this to say as he concluded his political report. He said, even at the most difficult times, our people have never surrendered. Despite the schemes aimed at destroying our movement, we grew both in stature and in effectiveness. We did not tear ourselves apart because of lack of progress. And at times, we're always ready to accept our mistakes and to correct them. But above all, we succeeded to foster and defend the unity of the ANC and the unity of our people in general. Even in bleak moments, we're never in doubt of winning freedom. We were never in doubt that the people's cause shall triumph. Amanda.
Thank you very much, Comrade Ayabonga. When Comrade Wasim spoke, he proposed as one of our practical solutions an employment guarantee scheme. Comrade Ayabonga has seconded that proposal. It is therefore adopted by this gathering, comrades, as one of our proposals. So very important, comrades. It's now adopted. It's now a position of the Youth League. We are moving in that direction, comrades. Comrade President, we are sure that you'll be able to put in place the necessary mechanisms at the level of government to ensure that the work starts on this issue of the employment guarantee scheme. Our last panelist, comrades, before we open up for discussion, is Comrade, the President of SAIC, Comrade Josopu. Are you ready for us? He is joining us virtually. Comrade Josopu?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much. You can proceed, leadership.
Okay, thanks very much, Comrade Convener, and greetings to the President. Mr. President, I think it is glaring that I am eldership by virtue that all young people seemingly have joined the dialogue in person, and I'm the only one seemingly who has not joined it in person. Probably that demonstrates that I am indeed old. Mr. President, I think the first thing that I would not do, and I wish to apologize to you, that I would not, Mr. President, give you solutions to the problems that you may have. And the reason, Mr. President, that I'm not going to give you solutions, because I believe we already have a lot of solutions to particularly the youth unemployment in South Africa. Just to count a few, Mr. President, the Youth Employment Accord that was negotiated in NETLEC, it is having 6 commitments. And one of those commitments, Mr. President, that was signed at NETLEC to the Youth Employment Accord, it talks to what you had announced last week in relation to ESCOM, renewable energy, and how young people can participate. The second element, Mr. President, that I think is a blueprint that is available is the Youth Employment Service, that is YES. Yes, Mr. President, it is quite clear, and it does have, to a certain extent, some exit mechanism for young people who have participated in YES. Also, Mr. President, we have what now probably the CEO of the NYTT has mentioned, that is the Youth Employment Initiative. So from where I'm sitting, I don't think we must generate new ideas, but rather, Mr. President, we need now to focus on how best we can implement what we have. Because the more we generate new ideas, the more they pile up. And once they pile up, Mr. President, we may be unable to implement because there will be too much for us. The second point that I wish to speak on, Mr. President, is that there seem to be in South Africa nowadays to be calls for consequence management in relation to politicians. But we speak less of officials in government who are not implementing policies that seek to address social ills in our society. Probably at some point, Mr. President, we need to zoom in close as to what is it that those who are in public service are doing to implement what has been agreed upon at the policy level. That's what I will start on, Mr. President, but also now on what has been proposed and seconded, that is the employment guarantee scheme. Colleagues may be aware, and Mr. President, you may be aware, there's what is called the Labor Activation Program that is housed at the Department of Employment and Labor and under the Unemployment Insurance Fund. What, Mr. President, the Labor Activation Program does, it says, come to us as UIF, apply, we will give you a certain amount for training, but the condition of us giving you this amount for training is that you must employ young people. I'm not sure what more do you want in terms of an employment guarantee scheme, if that is not it, Mr. President. However, some institutions of government, Mr. President, money is available to UIF, it is there, it has been returned back to UIF because there is no guarantee that, yes, you can take the money. In fact, they agree to take it, but they realize at some point that we cannot employ these young people. Probably we need not to create something new, Mr. President, in terms of what we're talking about of the employment guarantee scheme. Let's look and zoom closely on the labor activation program under the Department of Employment and Labor and the Unemployment Insurance Fund. And Mr. President, I'm not going to take much of your time because I don't have ideas, but rather I have a way forward on how we can implement. But I think, Mr. President, 3 things that I think we need to do next year. This is my last address on the Youth Month, President, of course, that I think next year, Mr. President, we need not to have a dialogue, as you have correctly said, of complaining, of generating new ideas. Next year, I appeal to my good colleagues of the NTT that probably next year, we need to have a report back session, Mr. President, on from a year, what has been done and what have been failures, how can you improve? Instead of coming again next year and say, this is what we think can be done, but rather let's come and report back and say, let's beat from what has been done and then we move forward. 2, Mr. President, I wish to implore unto you, it might be sitting on your desk, what is called the Presidential Youth Working Group. The Presidential Youth Working Group, Mr. President, it's a forum of young people wherein the president would then meet with young people quarterly. And in that meeting, usually the president sits with DGs, ministers or deputy ministers. Young people raise certain issues and the president can then say, Minister of Small Business, do you agree with this? How can you resolve this? Now, in that way, Mr. President, I think that's how we can move in doing things. 2, I think I have read the president's contracts with the ministers. And I have suggested before that youth development cuts across. Youth development is not an issue of the Department of Youth, Women, and People with Disabilities. Youth development is an issue of each and every department. So I therefore implore the president respectfully that probably when the contracts are being reviews of all the ministers, that each minister in his or her contract, there must be an element of youth development that they must deliver on, in making sure that ministers, they don't throw everything that has to do with youth to NYTA, to the Minister of Youth, Women and Disabilities, because youth development cuts across all departments. It is not an issue of one department. And lastly, Mr. President, in relation to this, I think, as I have said, that we don't need to hide the successes, because the perception out there is that nothing is being done. When we do the report back session, if it is agreed next year, we must also demonstrate publicly what has government done to assist young people, because what is out there is that the government is not doing anything. There are no people, there are no young people that are being assisted. We only celebrate these victories in private. So in my view, Mr. President, is that we need to be practical. No more dialogues, no more summits, no more conferences, but let's have report back sessions and build from them. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Chair.
We are having network problems in our venue. We are going to connect just now. Okay, while we try to sort out the network issues that we are facing, we will in the meantime, comrades, note hands for participation, and then hopefully by the time we are done noting hands, we would have sorted out our network issues. Comrades, we are noting hands. We are going to give strictly 2 minutes, comrades, strictly 2 minutes. There's 50 of us here, and if every one of us speak, we are going to take another couple of hours. So for those who want to engage, comrades, strictly 2 minutes. We are noting hands, and then after that, we'll note hands on the virtual platform. We are noting hands, comrades. Okay, we'll start that side. Is that comrade number one? I think it's comrade Tulisa, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Then it will be you, leadership number 2. Comrade Tlangi, you will be number 3. Comrade with the yellow, I can't see you properly, will be number 4. The comrade next to you will be number 5. Then on top over there, then comrade, you'll be number 6, and then you'll be number 7. How, comrade? Then you'll be number 8, comrade with the white t-shirt. Are we winning? Muted over there. Can we get visuals back? Great, we are back online. Thank you very much, comrades, and apologies for that. Can whoever is assisting us with the mic, comrades, strictly 2 minutes. Comrade Tulisa, you'll start. Then the comrade here in the front will be the second, and then we move.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Tulisa Ndlela. I'm from Durban. Comrades, I just want to make a comment first on the issue of austerity. You know, if you are inside of a hole, you've dug yourself into a hole. If you continue digging, you'll go further down. But if you don't do anything, you are guaranteed to stay there. So you need to dig, but you dig sideways in order for you to emerge out. So when you decide to stop spending, when you are in trouble, you are someone who decides to stop doing anything inside the hole, and you are guaranteed not to come out. So the idea of budget cuts when we're in trouble is similar to stop doing anything inside the hole, and that may be a problem. The second issue, Chair, I want to speak about is the second issue, Chair, I want to speak about is one of the practical solutions we may want to consider when applying for a job. I know in the ultimate, we want to get to a paperless job application, but at the moment you are still required to put in a certified copy of your degree, your ID, and matric certificates, things that will eventually be checked with SAQA and all these other things. And these things are expensive. Getting them to, not just the making of paper, but what happens is the process of going from where I am to photocopy and then to be able to certify, you know, maybe one of the considerations we must engage with the Department of Public Services to say, some people must just submit a CV, only those that are shortlisted, then be required to produce their certificates and all these other things. So as you make it easier, but the ultimate goal is we need to enter into a situation where you have e-careers, everybody loads their CV on the system, and when you're applying, you just click and start. But for those areas where you have network problems at the moment, maybe start doing that, because this certification thing, it really makes it difficult. And the last issue, Chair, with your indulgence, is the ease with which young people are able to source funding in state institutions. Now, it is the most difficult thing to do because some of these areas, and I'm not talking about the NYTA only, some of these areas, you are better positioned to raising capital with a commercial bank than you would with an FDI. Granted, the understanding is that an FDI must make it easier. So one of the things that maybe should be done is to zoom into the FDIs, just to look at their processes. You know, some of the things don't make sense. Some of the things, you know, doesn't make sense to ask for me for a 5-year projection when some of our businesses don't last more than 12 months.
Thank you. Thank you very
Chair.
much, leadership. Comrade here with the black T-shirt.
My name is Busiso Bengo from Artex Investment. I agree with this gentleman when it comes to sourcing out capital. It's the most difficult thing when you go into states. We, as Artex Investment, we managed to combine two formulas that no one in South Africa has been able to do. And we managed to make our products tested internationally by an Intertech company, which is the #1 standard company, and here in South Africa, but still we can't get funding. And the other issue that Tabang was talking about is getting into the market. It is the most difficult thing to get into the market. We have tried. Okay, the private sector is isolated itself, same as the government sector has isolated itself. Government sector is taking out tenders for Black people, so it's isolated white people, and white people have isolated themselves in the private sector. And now, them, at least they are organized, they're efficient, and they've got network and resources, and they use it amongst themselves. And we are on slow motion, like we in the matrix. And it takes forever to get assistance in the government sector. The government sector needs to change its system. And at least when you go there and you're looking for capital, at least it must take a month and get back to you. One more thing that I wanted to raise is that government, you got government, agriculture, you got Department of Health. You got Department of Health, these people don't have their own stuff. Department of Health doesn't have its own cough syrup. How many people can would be employed to produce a cough syrup for government, by government? How many people can be employed by agriculture to process cheese for the people, to process mealie meal, milk? Government needs to make its own products and employ the youth to make those products and get into the market. If he can't get to the market, then make his own market that he meets the community at to compete with the other market. That's the only way he can help us, because the other market over there is very well, it's strong. It's to penetrate it, we'll be wasting our time unless we have our own stuff.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sibus. It's a very important point that he's raising. In fact, perhaps when the president responds, he must tell us what happened to our state-owned pharmaceutical company. We are currently in a pandemic. We resolved on a state-owned pharmaceutical company over 10 years ago, and we still are manufacturing vaccines internationally and from private-owned pharmaceutical companies. So maybe that's an update the president can give us, because I think it's an important matter that we actually have not paid much attention to. Comrade Tangi, you are the next one.
Thanks, Comrade Acting President, and greetings to the comrades and young people that are joining us today. Mine are quite brief, Comrade Acting President, and I think the first panelist, I think it's Comrade Tandeka. In her opening, she asks a very important question, that what are we prepared to do, in order for us to realize some of the things that we've raised. And I think it's an important question, because I think we have been talking quite a lot. I think we've been having a lot of dialogues as young people. It's not really even a matter of whether we know what is it that we need to do or we do not. We don't know what is it that we're supposed to do. But I think, Comrade President, it's about time that we actually put the money where our mouths are, because we've been speaking for a very long time. I think there's a serious problem of misalignment, Comrade President, and I'll give you an example, because we seem to have a whole lot of programs that have been put in place where youth development is concerned. We seem to have a lot of youth service programs in place, but where is the centrality of, actually realizing these programs and making sure that these programs are implemented? Because I think these dialogues must now become, a platform where we do a progress report. We report on the progress that we've done. I know for a fact we've had a very same dialogue last year, Comrade President, and perhaps that is why young people are no longer interested in listening to us, because really we speak a lot, but we do very little. And I speak about misalignment in general because Comrade Tulisa is correct. We cannot speak about creating jobs and we continue to implement austerity measures. It does not make sense. Why we think that we can create jobs when 265 billion is being withdrawn from the economy of this country. And we expect that the problems that we're facing, that affect the majority of young people in this country will be resolved. They cannot be resolved. So President, we need to be realistic in the promises that we make. The youth service, initiative we were told and we were promised that 1 million jobs were going to be created, President. What has happened? Instead, only 50,000 jobs have been created in a period of 3 years.